Hello, fellow cyborgs, and welcome to the book review extravaganza. Today is day 3, and I hope you've been enjoying this so far. I've been having a lot of fun talking about my favorite books with you. Today, as the title of this video would suggest, we're going to be talking about Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, of course. But before we get any further, book haiku. Knowing your place in the world will only do so much for happiness. Okay, so Jane and I have quite a long relationship. Not as long as some of the other books that I have or will have mentioned will mention. I don't know. It's timey-wimey right now. You know, when you're filming, anything can be the present. You may have heard me say in my 25 bookish facts about me that Jane Eyre was the first high school reading classic that I actually read all the way through. I did skip a bit when, about the rivers, but in any case, I actually enjoyed it while I was reading it. And that was the first time that had happened. And I had been assigned to read Pride and Prejudice before Jane Eyre, The Scarlet Letter, Great Expectations, but no, Jane was the first classic that I actually chose to read as opposed to SparkNote because I was a horrid English student in high school. I got this copy. This is a Borders copy, actually, Borders Classics. Do you guys remember Borders in the States? They're dead now, unfortunately, but see, this is Borders Classics right there. The notes that I'm going to show you were actually ones that I took in college because I've read Jane Eyre 3.5 times. There was the initial reading senior year of high school. Then about a year later, I had jury duty and I took Jane with me and she helped me get through 3 days of jury duty. And then I reread it for a Victorian novels course at university because how could I say no to a course on Victorian literature in university? And then I only got through halfway the last time I reread it, which was probably in 2013. I was getting a little weird about Jane and Rochester, and so I just decided that I didn't want to keep reading at that moment in my life, so I am so due for a reread. But let me just show you the extent of these notes. This is the entire book. I just went nuts. I went nuts underlining things that I loved, underlining foreshadowing, making connections. It's just the entire book. And unfortunately, when I reread this, only got through half of it in 2013, I was reading a Kindle edition because my notes have made it where I actually kind of can't read this copy anymore. My notes are so distracting to what I'm actually reading, but I don't foresee me getting rid of this copy anytime in the near future because it just is me all through it. And since I can't even really enjoy reading this copy, why would I give it away assuming someone else could read it? So I kind of desecrated this copy of Jane Eyre, but in like the best way possible. For those of you who don't know what Jane Eyre is about, this is a quote-unquote autobiography written by Jane. My copy actually doesn't say that. However, in other editions it'll say Jane Eyre, subtitle, and autobiography. It's written in first person from Jane's perspective, and it starts at childhood. Jane is an orphan and is living with her awful aunt. Her aunt is her mother's brother's wife. Her actual uncle died, but on his deathbed made his wife swear that she would take care of Jane Eyre. And of course, she pulled a Dursley, she was never part of the family. I think she may have been better dressed and fed than Harry, but in any case, not part of a family, totally knows that she is not part of the family, is not loved. So it starts with Jane at the Reeds, and then eventually she gets sent to Lowood School when Mrs. Reed decides that she's just too much to handle and is an ungrateful child. Lowood School is awful, but there she finds her first and only friend. And then eventually, once she ages out of Lowood, she decides that she wants to be a governess for a family and ends up advertising and getting a response from Mrs. Fairfax of Thornfield Hall. She takes the engagement to teach Adele, who's this little French girl, at Thornfield Hall, and there eventually meets its master, character, Mr. Rochester. And this is the darkest and broodiest gent you will probably ever read about, probably darker and broodier than Edward Cullen. He has a past he's been trying to flee from across the world forever and always, but then suddenly, with Jane being at Thornfield, he's finding more and more reasons to stick around. So when I first read this, 17-year-old me was all up in shipping Jane and Rochester. That was my reason for reading. It was just, yes, all of the romance, the twisted, questionable romance. Upon rereading, and now I am almost 26 years old, the reason why I love Jane Eyre is because of Jane. Jane and I have very, very, very similar personalities, and this is pretty much a book about Jane discovering who she is, what her boundaries are, and then sticking to it. It's a book about Jane discovering who Jane is, and I am one of those people who believe it's just like RuPaul's Drag Race. If you can't love yourself, how the hell do you expect anyone else to love you? Or whatever the exact quote is. I'm not a super RuPaul Drag Race fan. The idea that happiness comes from yourself, and if you don't know yourself and understand yourself, how are you going to be happy? Another person's not going to make you happy. Another person can add to your happiness, but they will not create that happiness out of nothing if you can't find that peace within yourself. And this is in what I think is the essence of Jane Eyre. It's find yourself, be at peace with yourself, and happiness will follow, hopefully, knock on wood. There are a lot of questionable things in Jane Eyre when you are looking at it from a more analytical perspective. So when I first read this, I was pretty much just fangirling throughout the whole thing, and it was a jolly good time and wonderful. The more I read it, the more I see the problems in it. However, it's a book of its time. Old books are going to have issues in them that we don't agree with, but those issues haven't spoiled Jane Eyre for me. And I think that in essence, it could make it a more interesting read from an analytical level, even if you have to kind of say, I can love this, but I can't find it without fault anymore. And that's a grown-up way of reading. So there are definitely issues about colonialism, mental illness in here. Also kind of masochism themes come up in here. Also sexual or gender equality or inequalities come up in here. Thinking about the other as in like parts of self, or the other as far as foreignness with Adele and other characters. I love Jane Eyre. That's why it's here. That's why I'm talking about it here today. But I also do think that it is well-deserved as one of those classics, one of those classics that everyone at least has heard about, if not read, maybe knows a bit about, even if they haven't read it, or they've read it. And whether or not you love it or hate it or fall somewhere in between, I still do think that merit is here in this work for it to be so well known and so visible on the classics bookcases in Barnes & Nobles or Foyles or any other bookstore near you. To date, Jane Eyre is my only favorite classic novel. I'm really, really hoping that Villette by Charlotte Bronte will replace Jane Eyre as my favorite classic. We'll have to see, simply because I think my time being so close to Jane Eyre is coming to an end. I think that who I am has changed so much, thank goodness, from when I was 17 and first read this. So I'm looking forward to seeing if any other classics can stand beside Jane Eyre on my bookshelf of awesome, because I will never be able to get rid of this baby, this poor written-in baby. But so many good times, so many good hours of reading this and rereading this. It's just, thank you, Jane. Thank you so much for getting me through jury duty and having something nice to read in that Victorian novels class, and just for making me feel not alone. I really, really appreciate it. Props, Charlotte Bronte. I owe you very much. So please let me know in the comments down below. Have you read Jane Eyre? Do you agree with me? And if you don't agree with me, please feel free to let me know. As long as we're respectful of each other's opinions in the comments, discuss away. However, if you are going to talk about spoilers, I would just ask that you write spoiler in front, or if you hit the return button a couple times so that it doesn't show up and you have to say, click see more to actually see the spoiler. Just be respectful of the people in the comment section. I don't know if we need to still keep Jane Eyre spoiler free. I mean, it was written 150 years ago, 200 years ago? Charlotte Bronte wrote Jane Eyre in 1847, so that's coming up on 170 years. So should we be trying to retain spoiler, help people not be spoiled on something that has been around for 170 years? Whatever your opinion is on that question, I'm just going to ask you to be respectful of spoilers in the comment section, just because I enjoy discovering things for myself, and I hope that people who haven't read Jane Eyre yet would love to do the same. Thank you for watching. I know this wasn't a book you've never heard about before, but I couldn't make a review series of my favorite books without including my dearest Jane. Until next time, please continue to be lovely. You're ever so fantastic.